Trudeau, turning to you now, this crisis has once again shone a light on the unimaginable circumstances that women and girls find themselves in times of conflict. And this conflict is really, again, reminding us of the unique challenges that women and girls face in these moments. Separation from their families, gender-based violence as a weapon of war, all of these things come into play. So let me ask you this, in your view, what interventions do we need right now to deal with this issue in the context of Ukraine, but more broadly, how do we tackle this issue of gender equities?
Thank you so much. I mean, first and foremost, one of the things we've seen in so many different contexts over the past years, whether it's the climate crisis that I thank you for bringing up, whether it's the COVID crisis, or whether it's Vladimir Putin's illegal war in Ukraine, women and girls and the vulnerable get hit disproportionately hard, but are also a disproportionate level of the solution we need to bring forward. We need to make sure that looking at the horrors that are coming out of Bucha, the use not just of violence against civilians, but sexual violence specifically against women as a way of trying to crush the Ukrainian spirit, the Ukrainian identity. We need to stand incredibly strong to make sure we're protecting women and girls in this. That's why Canada, not just in regards to Ukraine, but all around the world, has a feminist international assistance policy that recognizes that protecting women and girls is one of the best ways to support not just getting through a crisis, but also rebuild afterwards. That's where we need to lean in on preparing for the future. And just to highlight, Ursula has spoken so strongly, and we've seen Andrzej Duda and others talk about how welcoming and how important it is for Europeans to be standing up and supporting the millions of refugees in Europe. But I've spoken with leaders from around the world who recognize that this crisis is having impacts around the world, either directly on humanitarian sides, but also in standing up for the rules-based order, the principles, the UN Charter, sovereignty of countries. This is a time for all of us to be standing together and doing the right things, and that is why I'm so glad to be representing the world as we co-convene this conference with Ursula.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for that important context there. Prime Minister Trudeau, if I could bring you in here, the immediacy of the social media-driven news cycle is driving the way we're consuming news. We've all seen the heartbreaking images of hospitals being targeted in Ukraine, and we've read the many stories of medical supply lines being blocked. We know that the sudden and the significant flow of refugees has put strain on healthcare systems. So I want to spend a moment and focus on that and get your thoughts on how conflict impacts healthcare systems and what must international governments do.
Thank you very much. First of all, one of the things that we've seen over the past years, whether it was the COVID crisis or whether it's this war in Ukraine, everything's interconnected around the world. None of us are fully isolated from impacts of what's going on elsewhere. That's why I thank Hugh for bringing up the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. I'm actually co-leading with Mia Motley of Barbados a push to really make sure that countries are buying in fully on this with not just the money but the will, as Hugh mentions. But we need to respect and understand that the focus that Putin has had on impacting civilian infrastructure, whether it's the train station we saw recently, whether it's civilians in Bucha, or whether it's maternity wards or hospitals, there is a deliberate attempt to cause as much long-term damage as possible to the Ukrainian people, and that is where the world does need to continue to stand up. Obviously, we need to be there to help heal the war wounds right now, but we also know there will be young people, as Ursula talked about, impacted for decades by the violence, by the horrors of war. We need to make sure we're there to build resilience, there to deal with the mental health consequences as well of the trauma, of the loss, of the grief, of the fear that has been brought in, that stability that the world has started to take for granted in many places is now highlighted, that it's not automatic, and we need to continue to be there for each other even as we stand up for each other and stand for Ukraine.